Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for people who listen to us from the Americas. Thank you to be here. I'm happy to speak today about art-based trainings. What are art-based trainings? They are trainings in which you are actually developing skills and competence through art events. So it seems so far away from procurement. This is not what we usually do in procurement. And this is exactly what I would like to explore with you during this session. So what's the problem? We were born in procurement in times of plenty of suppliers, of cost reduction opportunities. And procurement was about massifying, commoditizing, processing, etc., etc. And we are now, of course, in another context where we have done all this. We have processed procurement, we have massified volumes, we have commoditized a number of categories. And we are now looking for innovation. We are looking for new ideas. We are working on risk reduction. We also want to take risk. We want to transform the business, contribute to the business transformation, etc., etc. So what is expected from procurement is definitely different from what was expected when we were born, or what was expected 30 or 40 years ago. It's more about innovation, entrepreneurship, leadership, and it has to, of course, it relies on new competence and new skills. And we at the EIPM, we believe that buyers need to become entrepreneurs. Internal entrepreneurs, or so-called intrapreneurs, towards stakeholders, leading stakeholders, convincing stakeholders, or external entrepreneurs by developing networks, ecosystems of suppliers, etc., etc. To do this, buyers need to be strong personalities, to be leaders, to be convincing, to be heard, and to develop constantly their leadership. And this is probably why we have to shift our way of learning. We don't need to learn so many theories and tools. We need to learn to be more proactive, more of leaders, which of course means that we need to shift our proper conceptions of procurement and our proper conceptions of ourselves. So we need to train in other ways to become new types of buyers. So what we will do during this webinar is we will start by very practical examples of art-based training in three companies, right? One is using theater, the other one is using core direction, and the other one is not exactly art training, it's more sport or nature, but it's using the taming of stallions. So we will just look at these real examples and try to ask ourselves, what is it that doing this, going through these very different ways of learning, what is it that we learn? And what do we have to unlearn, and what do we have to relearn? We will ask ourselves, of course, the skills that can be taught by that kind of approaches. We will go through a number of art-based trainings so that we speak about tangible products, I would say, learning products, using theater, using visual arts, using writing, using nature, etc., etc. And we will have a look at the two consequences. First, how it trains our social abilities to contact, to be proactive, to put people in contact, to create networks, to create communities. That's social skills. And how it improves our cognitive skills, or generic cognitive competence. So how it helps us to perceive more, to memorize more, to learn more in a more agile way, etc., etc. And we will conclude about what kind of entrepreneurs we can be, what kind of entrepreneurship we can develop through these new types of trainings, art-based trainings. And I'd like to start very practically by examples. The first example, it happened in the luxury industry, used stallion taming. So basically the participants were alone in an arena with stallions, wild stallions, and they had to calm the stallion down and learn how to do it, and learning while doing it how you take the lead on the stallion, right? Um, So the context of the company was a community of buyers spread among various BUs and around the globe. So they didn't know one another. It's a huge organization. They had very little connection, or if not no connection, with one another. And the context is also a context that's the luxury industry of very, very powerful stakeholders who decide about everything. So designers had all power, and buyers were in a very reactive position and couldn't take the lead and couldn't take any initiative. And this is exactly what we wanted to revert. And of course, there was a need for stakeholders to gain some form of influence, leadership on stakeholders. So what was the experience? 12 people, all coming from different BUs, different countries, not knowing one another. To get alone in an arena with a stallion, and with the experience of calming the stallion and progressively taking the lead and managing to direct the stallion, calm him down, but also direct him and make him go, stop, go left, go right, etc., only through the voice. Of course, there was a coach helping them to do so. The next day, we crystallized on how to gain leadership, right? And what we crystallized, of course, was not so much about gaining leadership on a stallion, but gaining leadership on human beings, and notably on our stakeholders. And that was followed, of course, by internal challenges, projects to be undertaken in the next months. What were the results? We raised an awareness about problems of leadership, how to manage the leadership. So doing it with a stallion, experiencing it with a stallion, gave them ideas about how to do with human beings, and notably with stakeholders. So they identified key levers to take the leadership over people, and they outlined a number of initiatives to be undertaken in the procurement community and with stakeholders to start to make things move and to do something new. So very positive results. Another example, I have three, as I told you. The second one is core direction. And that happened in the electronics industry. So what is the context? You probably have heard of scarcity of components, of raw materials. Together with the scarcity, of course, soaring prices. Prices are multiplied by 2 or by 3 or by even more sometimes. And of course, all this led key suppliers to become a little more opportunistic than they were before, right? Aggressive pricing strategies, playing a kind of reverse competition game, so make customers wait and pay more to gain their preference, etc., etc. And buyers did not exactly know how to react and to take the lead in a situation in which, in reality, they were extremely passive and even struggled to be reactive, and of course couldn't find a way to be proactive and lead the market. So what was the experience? The buyers were exposed to a professional choir of an orchestra with the director. The director first started in the first 15 minutes to show how he was directing the choir, and then giving the stick to people and asking them to direct the choir. And at the very beginning, of course, after 10 seconds, since we didn't know how to direct the choir had to stop and was just laughing because that was not working. And then they had to repeat and do it again and again and again, and become sensitive to the signals of the choir, be also sending signals to the choir, and progressively lead a piece of more than 10 seconds, and then a minute, and then 3 minutes, and finally lead the whole piece, even if they did not know the music piece. So the experience stopped when the person, it was category managers, could reach a recognizable result. What were the results? Immediate feedback after, how to coordinate people. Signals to send to them, signals to be sensitive from them, how to manage an ensemble of people together. We immediately crystallized best practices, scenarios, and I immediately bridged this with initiatives to lead suppliers and local buyers. And people were regularly meeting online to exchange among the group. So all the people who went through this experience regularly met and exchanged on how to increase this leadership. A third case was in the automotive industry, where they decided to invest on theater exercises. Well, again, the automotive industry is a very specific context, because there's a major technology shift. We need to be excellent in electric vehicles, whereas all the excellence today has been were built on thermal vehicles. So we need to learn to be good, to be excellent in a technology that we don't know. So buyers are asked to detect innovators, to evaluate innovators on things on which they have no expertise, and on technologies that nobody in the company, neither the buyers nor the stakeholders, know well. So buyers are expected to orchestrate innovation, and they don't have the expertise of it, and they don't know how to do this. So what was the experiment? Various exercises, theater exercises, teaching people to inspire. Where can I get inspiration? Notably lateral inspiration. How can I use so-called accidents, which means when something unexpected happens, how can I react to the unexpected and make it look natural, integrate it into my acting? And also creative synthesis. So while I have fonts of information, they are completely heterogeneous, and I need to combine all this into one single coherent output. One-day experiments, exercises on these behaviors. Results of it. After 1 year of regular coaching on theater experience, buyers have crystallized new ways of innovating, new processes of innovation, which were successful. So and second effect, for the first time in the history of this company, and probably of the car making industry, of the automotive industry, innovation was led by procurement. Procurement was the key leader of innovative processes. And we also carried out a survey after all this 1 year experiment, which showed that the perception that people have, stakeholders have about procurement, completely changed. They see people, procurement people, as key people in the organization, which was not the case before. So these three examples just show that we can expect a lot, very, very important and valuable things to change, to be transformed by art-based trainings. And now let's look at how it can work. Procurement needs to learn, and learning means unlearning and relearning. Why do we need to learn? Well, because we've come a long way, right? We were born in the 60s as people managing deliveries, checking deliveries, and managing prices. And progressively, along the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the years 2000, we developed more kind of cost intelligence. We developed a kind of total cost understanding. We became more transversal, and then started to work not only passively out of the natural competition between suppliers, but more proactively to stimulate the suppliers through collaborative approaches, etc., etc. So we have evolved a lot, right? There's a whole evolution history in not more than 60 years. So that's a very peculiar story. Buyers need to transform and have transformed in a very quick way. So we needed to shift from price to contribution to the business, from competitive schemes to collaborative schemes, and notably moving from tenders only and high pressure on competition to SRM partnership, co-development involvement. We needed to change our passive behaviors, reactive behaviors into proactive behaviors. And we need to change tools and add to our ordinary tendering processes, cost breakdown, new tools on carbon measurement, how to embed artificial intelligence in our procurement processes, etc., etc. So we have changed a lot, but what we mostly need to change is now, today, to become more proactive, our business conduct. And as the word says, conduct is a matter of behavior. So business conduct is made of behavior. What kind of new behaviors should we develop? First of all, wisdom. We need to know more. We need to know more about markets. We need to know more about suppliers, about context, about technologies, etc., etc. We need to be wiser than we used to be 20 years ago. Second, we need to be more inventive to solve difficult problems that arise more and more, and the geopolitical situation, the climate change, etc., push us into always more difficult situations. We need to be more inventive to solve all these, to get out of all these difficulties. We need also to be inventive to innovate and to contribute to innovation processes. We need to gain more insights, to know more, to detect more about markets and about suppliers, opportunities, suppliers of technological opportunities, etc., etc. So we need to have intuition and insights from the reality. We need to develop a certain originality, a certain oddity. We need to dare to be original, to think out of the box, to bring something unexpected, to be perceived as odd, but positively odd, bringing something new and making things change. To do all this, we need to unlearn who we used to be, to unlearn to be this kind of very passive, reactive buyer, focused on his or her tenders and focused on the price reduction, and relearn to be another type of buyer, driven by innovation, driven by his or her behaviors, and the power of positive behaviors to bring value not only to procurement, but to the general company, to the company revenue, to our brand, to the products, etc., etc. And we need to shift learning mode. We call a single learning mode the old learning, in which we were understanding theories, tools, approaches, processes. That was the old training. The new trainings need, on the contrary, to change perspective, to change ideas, to change behaviors, to adopt new conducts, new personal behaviors. And that is very different, of course. It's not so much tools and theories to work on. It's about ourselves, who we are, how we react, how we behave in terms of business. Changing perspective, we need to unlearn to focus from cost only, to relearn to think about revenue and carbon footprint. We need to unlearn to be reactive and learn to be proactive. We need to unlearn to be satisfying, at the service of stakeholders, and learn to be leading them, even challenging them. We need to unlearn to be neutral, cold, distant from suppliers, and learn to be cooperative, engaged, trusting suppliers. So what are the skills that we actually need? Some skills we don't need anymore, and I will start by this. I will start by the skills we don't need anymore to go to the skills that we probably need. Do we need to work like a machine? Everything is interlocked with cogs and gears, etc., etc. No, that's a mechanistic way of seeing procurement. yeah, we don't need to develop this. We already have it, right? So no need to adopt that kind of perspective. Do we need to adopt a perspective where we need to embed everything into the other, right? Each system being relative to a department, a function, so everything is worked as a kind of system. Well, that already, we are already doing this. So no need to change perspective, to adopt that kind of perspective. Do we need to manage more complexity? Yeah, well, the world is more and more complex for sure, and we have to manage interacting people and change roles, combine roles, etc., etc. But we have already been sensitized to this, so this is not what the perspective that we really need to develop. Do we need to adopt a fatalistic posture, like everything is predetermined? Of course not. So what is it that we need to develop? We need to develop a kind of, and to adopt a constructivist perspective. Our value add is co-created by us, procurement, and stakeholders. And we need to build processes, ways of working, types of relations with stakeholders so that we build a value together. And this value includes price reduction and cost reduction, but not only. And that obviously has to do with proactiveness, social entrepreneurship or social brokerage, trust with people, and convergent thinking. We need also to adopt a kind of relativistic perspective on procurement. Each procurement professional creates his or her own value add, and we need to combine all these opinions and explore all kinds of opinions, be open to challenging opinions. And this has to do, of course, with spanning boundaries, thinking out of the box, going further than what was accepted. The power of vision, of having a vision, the ability to have and crystallize a vision and think in a divergent way. And we probably also need to adopt a kind of mythic posture, selling the value add of procurement, explaining what procurement can do, the vocation of procurement. Has to do with lateral thinking, with problem solving, with sense making. And it is about telling stories, inspirational stories which exemplify and explain exactly what procurement can do. So, practically speaking, we're speaking about learning. What should we do? Should we still have instructional sessions? Yes, they're useful, but their value add is model, theory, self-reflection. They make people understand, right? Not more than this. Should we have cognitive sessions? What is this? Experiences, evaluation, testimonies, so people get to know by others, by the power of a guest speaker testimonying about something, by the power of an experience with a stallion, in a theater day, etc., etc. That's interesting. We need this too. Because it makes us feel it, get to know it, and feel it inside our personality, not only mentally. It's not the same type of brain which is solicited. In instructional sessions, it is a rational brain which is solicited. In cognitive sessions, it is more the intuitive brains. And I don't want to go into neurology, but they're not the same. They don't have the same situation in our skull. We also need probably behavioral sessions made of games, of training, of exercises, and they make you adopt it. So one thing is understanding, another thing is, okay, getting an insight. Another thing is taking it for oneself and say, right, this is mine now, and I know how to do it, and I will do it. Adopting it. And behavioral games, training, exercises are an experience because we get to know how it works, but they're also an experiment. We have an experiment of new ways of doing, and they're also soliciting the emotional brain, made of feelings, made of emotions, sensations. And what is the power of the emotional brain? Fixing, right? When we have been emotionally involved, we memorized, we get concerned. we fix faster, etc. And then we will be motivated. Motivation is emotional. If you understand things, but you don't mobilize at any time the emotional brain, then nothing happens because you're not concerned, and you quickly forget. And the question is, can art do this? Experiences, emotion, feelings, sensations? Probably yes. So what are art-based trainings? Let's look at a kind of a very small and quick catalog of what has been used in procurement. I started by 3 examples, but I will now open the catalog of all kind of arts-based methods. And I will not speak about everything, that would be too long, but mostly quote some art-based approaches using theater, music, visual arts, and notably painting, but also sculpture, nature experiments. You understand that stallion is more an experience with nature, and writing. Theater training, what are they made of? Well, sketches to push people to communicate or to train people to communicate, role plays to exercise situational behaviors and notably within negotiations, exercises to train reactions, to train reactiveness, positivity, openness, etc., or to train social brokerage, the ability to be a kind of social broker, social entrepreneur, and improv to develop one's own charisma. How does it apply to procurement? Well, all of what we said before applies to negotiation situations, internal negotiation with stakeholders when we need to persuade stakeholders, to formulate strategy, and of course to develop a certain leadership toward the teams or toward the community, towards our peers. Music now, a art-based training based on music. What do they consist in? Discovering the learning process, learning to learn with an instrument, and we don't know what to do about it, and learning to learn. Improv to train leadership or direction of an ensemble of people. That's for example, the choir direction we already mentioned. And improv, again, to train synchronization, to be together with people. How does it apply to procurement? What kind of situation? Well, when we need, and I'm thinking about reactivity, synchronization, when we are in fast-moving environments. So being completely synchronized with extremely erratic and volatile situation. Also to align team, to think about core direction, to align the team on the signals sent by the director, and to synchronize the team in very global organizations. Visual art, and notably painting, drawing, sculpture too, etc., etc. Well, what are art-based trainings based on? Imitation, notably imitation of a painting, learning to imitate, reinterpreting. So when we have a model and we want to not to imitate, but on the contrary, to reinterpret. So keeping something key about what we reinterpret, but giving a new meaning, how to do this. And of course, discover how to be creative. So how does it apply to procurement? Notably when procurement needs to develop creativity. Transforming industry, we need to be creative, we need to invent new models, new technology, new ways of working, new concepts, etc., etc. We need to be creative, and procurement, to be a leader, needs to develop its creativity. Sometimes there are situations in which procurement is depressed because we're not solicited enough, because we are in a very reactive mode, because stakeholders just want us to organize tenders and that's all, etc., etc. So we need to be creative and develop also this creativity, and we need also to nurture one's own learning adaptability in fast-moving fields. Writing workshops, what are these? What do they consist in? Creative writing. So basically training people to create a story, to invent a story, Playwriting, invent a story which is more like a theater play, so more interactive. And that's, of course, playwriting usually describes situations, scenarios, and notably scenarios of conflicts. And interactive writing, how do you create a story, not yourself alone, but with many other people? How do you manage all the inputs coming from here and there? Well, how does it apply to procurement? Well, storytelling. It teaches us to storytell what we are doing, to crystallize strategies, to define strategy, to crystallize them in stories, in words, in crystallizing a collective narrative that people then can use, and in gamifying market scenarios. One of last one is the last type of art-based training is not based on arts, so the wording is strange, but it's based more on nature. And this has been developing a lot in the last years, in the last 2-3 years. So one example was taming stallion. Another example is hikes in the environment, enhancing the perception to make people perceive things about the nature, the animals, etc., and more challenging experiences about survival in wild environment, learning to survive without any resource in wild environment. How does this apply to procurement? First of all, developing intuition. Second, building a long-term strategy and thinking, of course, of surviving in wild environments. Building trust. You understand that when you learn to tame a stallion, when you learn to become a leader of an animal who does not understand your word, it's all a matter of creating that trust between you and the animal. And strengthening teams, of course, in turmoil, again, survival in wild environment. Now, how do such trainings happen? You have usually a process. You first invite people, and you invite them a long time before it starts, because they need to think about this peculiar experience that you're inviting them to. Maybe they will go on the net, see, etc. Don't invite them 2 weeks before. You need to invite them weeks and weeks before, months before. And then, of course, the experience, the artistic experience or natural experience happens, of course, presentially, not online. And it's a happening. It's really one day, which is extremely prepared. They come the day before, they are welcome, they have a dinner, etc. And then there is one day about this special experiment. Just after this day, at the end of the day or the morning of the next day, instant feedback. What have they learned? So they start to crystallize what they learned, being with a stallion, or making a theater exercise on stage, or having survived for 24 hours in a mountain, etc., etc. Instant feedback, so that they start to crystallize some learnings on leadership. Once they've done this, you need to leave them time to resonate, right? So we need not to speak about it for a few days or 1 or 2 weeks. And they start, of course, to transform their behaviors. And during this behavioral transformation, you need to coach them through either initiatives or small projects, and relate to what the experience was, and to the feedback the first instant feedback they crystallized. And once they have gone through this process and have started to change their behaviors, then you can have a distant feedback, so that they see how to develop. So the invitation is key. It should stem from the context, and they should see the link between what they live, the business we're in, the suppliers we have, our organization difficulties, and this training. You must make them understand. And you should drop the concept of behavior. We're not training you to use a matrix or to use a tool. We're training you on behaviors and on your general behavior in the business. Then, of course, the presential happening, usually one day, not more than one day. very rare, sometimes too, but it's very rare. It's necessarily outside of the company premises, and frequently we have good reasons to organize it outside. You can't tame stallion in your office, can you? Same thing for a core or a painting or whatever. Um, and this one day can be combined with other things, things which are more rational. So it's potentially a week or 3 days in which there will be one day of that kind of experiments, and then 2 days on other more classical matters. And then the instant feedback is extremely important. Just after the experience, they have to express what they personally lived through the experience. And they have to make it happen very quickly and informally, because we want to have it authentic, so not distorted. So just at the end of the day, or I think the best is the next morning. What is important is to take good note of what people say, with the words they use, the phrases they've used. Just put verbatims and quote exactly their sentence. They are the ingredients for you then to coach them, then to develop them. And then let them digest so that the experience resonates, infuse for a few weeks without saying anything. And then you can start the behavioral transformation. You come back to the experiment, you say, right, so what is it that you want to start to do that you were not doing before? What is it that you want to change? So practically, what kind of initiative will you take? What kind of actions will you put in place? And when they start to work on this, constantly come back to the verbatims, the phrases that they've used during the instant feedback, to bridge and to make the link between business initiative and the artistic or natural experience. So of course you coach their progressive adoption and implementation of this. So this usually lasts a few months, and once this is done, of course, people express their feedback on the adoption and implementation of new business behaviors. And it's only then that we can judge about the pertinence of the approach. And frequently people in this distant feedback start to think about themselves, how they should develop themselves, etc., etc. And it becomes a little bit of an HR thing, right? How to self-develop oneself. And it's a good idea to invite HR to this distant feedback. Timeline, as you can see, invite month in advance explaining why. You have a presential happening just followed by an instant feedback. A few weeks after, you start to work with them to coach their behavioral transformation relating to the experience and their first feedback. It lasts a few months, let's say 3 to 6 months, and then you have a distant feedback. Right. So now what are the consequences on social skills and cognitive skills? First thing, social skills. Is there anything social to improve on our side? Oh, yes, there is, because we need to be social and more social, because we have more and more stakeholders, because needs, interests are always more complex and ambiguous, because we need to gain influence to develop our influence on decision makers. And we need an opportunity to step into upstream processes. So we need to achieve more ambivalence, more multi-connection, more influence, increase our credibility, develop our proactiveness toward market players. So the social skills related are, and if you have participated to our last webinar on creativity, you've heard already of these social skills. Social brokerage, the ability to create relations among people and to be at the center of all these relations. Sense making, providing meaning, and boundary spanning, the ability to push the boundaries, to push the frontiers, start to think out of the box, do out of the box, and trespass the old boundaries, the old limits of what the procurement function was before. So social brokerage, I'm not repeating, it's the process in which we act as intermediaries developing social relations among people. R-based approaches can help social brokerage, by developing charisma, by disinhibiting people. I'm thinking about theater experiences, for instance, by creating communities, and by learning to position as an intermediary between various people. Boundary spanning, so pushing the limits, pushing the frontiers, go out of the box. Our base approach can help boundary spanning by pushing people to dare to be disruptive, to be a kind of heretic, to break the ice, to disrupt, and also to put ourselves in the other's shoes, to understand until which limit we can go and what we can target to touch their interests. What is sense making? It's about creating meaning. So in an unknown situation, in an unknown context, structuring it, and then to be able to act in it by spreading new meanings and road mapping. Art-based approaches can help sense making because they can create meanings for unknown others. They always push us to crystallize, to inspire from what we've lived, and crystallize outputs, conclusions for our jobs, for our professional positions, and knowing how to explain. So telling stories, crystallizing narratives. Right. So art-based trainings do develop social skills, but not only. Also cognitive skills. So what is this cognitive word about? What does this mean? Well, it's all about perception, how we perceive, how we hear, how we see the reality, how we are concentrated on the reality, attention, how we memorize things, and notably facts and data. And we know how in procurement there are so many facts and data and info coming from the suppliers that a lot of it we don't even know that it's here, or we forget, or we neglect, etc., etc. And it's also cognitive competence is also the ability to change oneself according to what we see and hear. So learning, being adaptive, developing and adapting behavior according to the situation and the context. I change myself. That's part of the cognitive competence, and of course decision making. So theater, music, visual arts, nature, writing, they indeed develop our ability to perceive stimuli and combine various stimuli together, and to also, by integrating all this stimuli, build a holistic view. And it also stimulates open-mindedness. And that's very useful for ambiguous markets and complex networks. Theatre, music, visual arts, art, and nature, writing also help us to develop attention and memory by inciting us to capitalize information, compare information, and again build this holistic view. And that, of course, helps in a situation in which we are in front of very innovative markets. There is a profusion of innovators, of innovation ideas, etc., etc. We need to select, we need to combine, etc., etc. And we have a proliferation of solutions. Theatre, music, visual arts, nature, writing also help us to learn, or learn, to adapt, an adaptive behavior. So they push us to adapt to new stimuli, to the unknown, to change our reactions, our reacting modes, to adopt new ways of doing. So basically developing more adaptive behaviors. And that's, of course, extremely needed for fast-moving environments, changing risks, and transforming industries. Theatre, music, visual arts, nature, writing also help us to take decisions by training us to process and integrate information and optimize the fluidity between perceiving and reacting. And that's very needed for emergencies or high-speed environments and lead management. There are also some specific procurement soft skills which are increased by this cognitive competence, and notably open-mindedness. The open-mindedness is, of course, as you know, is a quality of consider new ideas and opinions and that are new or different to your own. Art-based approaches help open-mindedness by pushing us to consider more options, to invent alternatives, to think out of the box, to always be ready to something new, and to adapt to the new. Another soft skill, which is developed by these cognitive competence, is the ability to have a vision, to crystallize, to build a vision, to crystallize it, and to explain it. So what we call visionariness. It's about having a vision and transforming a transformation because of this vision. And art-based approaches help visionariness by pushing us to clarify the vision, to make it clear and to explain it and to formulate it and to embed this new vision into the old. It's not about adopting the new and throwing away the old. It's adopting the new and embed it into the old to make it a consistent system. And of course, visions feeds and fuels attitudes and behaviors. As a kind of conclusion, then, we're reaching a conclusion to this of this topic. We spoke initially of the necessary entrepreneurship that we need to develop in procurement. We need to become intrapreneurs with stakeholders. We need to become economic entrepreneurs with suppliers, with networks of suppliers, with ecosystem. So we need to develop our entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. How can we develop this? First of all these artistic experiences or sport experiences or natural experiences create a community. By doing it together, by opening ourselves together to new modes, we strengthen the community. We also strengthen and build an identity for procurement, an identity for the team. So arts-based training create a certain we-ness of the team. We are more aligned because we are more convinced of the same things, and notably about the new behaviors and business conduct that we need to develop. Very importantly, the followers make the entrepreneur. We need also to develop entrepreneurship by creating our own followers. There's no leader who leads only for himself or herself. A good leader is a leader who has followers, obviously. But we have to build these followers. We have to make people these followers. So we have to learn to convince, persuade, engage, embark people into our views, our visions, our actions, our action plans, etc., etc. And arts-based trainings train us to attract people, to attract followers, and also to embark them, to put them in the game, notably theater exercises. Of course, as you know, leaders are always boosted by contexts. If everything goes well and there's no need for change or transformation, it's very hard to be a leader, and there's no need for entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs. But when the context is burning, when prices are soaring, when raw material are scarce, when the geopolitical situation endangers the stability of the supply chain, when the climate change needs to rethink completely what we buy, how we supply ourselves, etc., etc., then the context is burning, and we need leadership to start the transformation. And art-based training can speed up the response to these contexts. They make people more reactive, more creative, to answer quickly and in a more powerful way to the strains, the pressures of this context. Entrepreneuring is about learning in the meaning that we are entrepreneurs, we are leaders, if we constantly learn. A good leader is not only leading the others, but learning from others and learning from the environment and conveying and transmitting what he or she has learned to others. So leadership, entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship are all a matter of being constantly learning and being in constant learning dynamics, which means that we need to develop our personal agility and personal adaptation. We need to be plastic and to constantly shape and reshape according to the environment. And arts-based trainings can enhance our agility. This is the end of this webinar. I would be happy to answer to some of your questions if you have any. This is, of course, a very unusual topic. We are not speaking about odd topics all the time, but there's a clear move in the business toward new ways of learning, which are seen as more powerful than instructional trainings where we learn again about the same tools on strategy, on cost management, on risk management, etc., etc. And there's a clear move, and notably in industries or in companies in which you have a high pressure or a difficult context and the business needs to be transformed, and procurement can help the transformation, and procurement can lead the transformation. Questions? A question that is frequently asked to us, are art-based trainings or nature-based trainings only behavioral? Do they just teach us and train us to behave? Well, I've answered this already in half an hour ago. No, not only. Of course, it's art-based trainings, notably theater, core direction, teach us to change our behaviors, but not only behaviors, our perceptions, our aware. So they help us to become aware of who we are, who are the others, how we react with the others, to change our own ideas about ourselves. So a kind of self-awareness about my business conduct and my business behaviors. So yes, art-based trainings train behaviors, but no, not only behaviors. They also develop our self-awareness and our perception about ourselves. Another question is if this is a widespread approach. Is it really very used in procurement? The answer is no, not yet. And why am I saying not yet? For two reasons. The first thing is that it was not used at all a few years ago, and it starts. So there's clearly a start of something. And another reason is that in procurement, no. But in sales, yes. In marketing, yes. For managers, yes, etc., etc. So basically, arts-based trainings are not new. They're 40 years old. They started in the 70s and developed a lot in the 80s and 90s. So it's not a new approach in itself, but it's a new approach in procurement. It starts in procurement now, probably because procurement is becoming more of a leader. And by becoming more of a leader, we adopt leadership practices. And notably, one of these leadership practices is to inspire from lateral fields such as arts, sports, or art, sports, or nature. And that's another question. Arts-based training, sports-based training, nature-based training. Is there a bit of confusion over this? Well, it's mostly arts-based training that have been developed until now. But in the recent years, and notably, I would say in the 5, 6, 7, so mid 2015, something like this, a number of nature-based training, animals-based training have started. So we carry on speaking about arts-based training, even if it includes more than arts, right? And as you have seen in my little catalog of what companies, procurement departments do, it includes, yeah, arts such as theater, such as visual arts, such as music, but it also includes stallion taming, it includes hikes in the environment, etc., etc. So it was basically born on arts, and now it includes even more lateral fields. Right. Any more question? I don't see any more question. So I have to thank you for your attention. This is a very unusual topic in procurement, so it must have been very surprising to you, but it's a very important one. First, because it's new, so there's an opportunity, and second, because it is probably the signal, one of the signals that procurement is changing and procurement is always closer to leadership practices. Thank you very much. See you again in one of our webinars.